All right, welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast. In today's podcast, we have on a good friend of mine, Mr. Morgan Cignini, who I've known for a while. He lived just above the border from me, and we're going to get him on here to talk about a bunch of different stuff, fishing, in the United States versus Canada, and how things in Canada kind of work and transition towards, in comparison, to the United States. And we're just going to talk about a bunch of stuff, largemouth, smallmouth, and fishing mentality. We're going to get into it. It's going to be pretty fun. But before we get into today's podcast, a huge shout out to Douglas Outdoors for sponsoring the Serious Angler podcast. Recently, I've been getting on a good chatterbait bite, getting some of these post spawners that are moving off bed, and I've been throwing the Douglas X Matrix 715F. 7'1". It's about a medium heavy to a heavy action with a very fast tip, and it's been great for a chatterbait. I've been using it for spinnerbait as well. The action has worked great. I've been picking them off, and I've been using the queen tackle switchblade or the swim jig head. So I've been taking the queen tackle tungsten swim jig heads, putting it on the queen tackle switchblade, which is, for those who don't know, it's like a chatterbait blade that they sell individually that you can put on any sort of jig head. And throwing that and then having some good success with that. It's a great combination. So if you guys have not already, go check out douglasoutdoors.com as well as queentackle.com. Go check out and get yourself in a rod, get yourself in some innovative tackle. I know I haven't really talked too much about queen tackle, but I'll be sure to fill you guys in on the next coming podcast, because on episode number 100, we are going to be running a giveaway with queen tackle. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. You can win some pretty awesome tungsten jigs. You will not want to miss out on that. So without further ado, Mr. Morgan Cignini. Let's get him on. All right, we are recording. Mr. Morgan Cignini, what's going on, man?
Not much, buddy. How are you doing?
Doing good. We're in two different countries right now, even though we're probably only maybe, an hour and a half from each other, if that?
Across the lake, probably 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
When there is, yeah.
Yeah, I could probably hop on the boat and be there just in time for dinner.
Exactly. But if you go around the way, it's probably closer to 3.5, maybe 4.
So how long does it take you? And I don't think any of the listeners will know. Well, not many will know where Canisius Lake is, but you know where Canisius Lake is. Yeah. So how long is that a drive for you?
It's about 4 hours, I think. 3.5 to 4 hours. I mean, it's 2 hours door to door for me to get to Buffalo.
Okay.
Probably about an hour there, hour and a half, right?
Yeah, so it's probably 3.5, because it takes me an hour and 20, depending on traffic, to get to Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's probably what it is. So whereabouts in Canada are you?
So if you know where Toronto is,
yeah,
I'm in Toronto, and I would be probably about half an hour southwest of Lake Simcoe. A lot of bass anglers might know where Lake Simcoe is.
Yeah, I know. I've asked you a few questions about Simcoe before. I'm still dying to get up there and fish it.
You should. Although I used to love it. I have a little bit more of a hate relationship now with it. But honestly, if you spend the time out there, the fish are just gigantic.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
They're smart, bro. They're smart. They've been well educated, and you just have to finesse them. Yeah. Although in the fall there's times when you can power fish too. You can throw big spinner baits and get big ones, but I find fishing on Erie's just a little bit easier.
I can definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Sure.
I'm definitely gonna get up there at some point. I think, are the borders even open yet?
No, they were supposed to open on June 21st, but I think they're gonna push that back.
Okay.
For like non-essential travel, so.
Fishing's pretty essential, man. I mean, I gotta.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but I've had my fair share of time in Canada. I played hockey growing up, so I spent a lot of time fishing, or not fishing. I wish I was fishing. Playing hockey in Toronto and like St. Catharines and up in Quebec, Montreal. But I hate cities. I'll tell you that I hate cities, but I never minded Toronto. I always loved going up into Canada.
Yeah, Toronto is it's our version of New York City, so it's a little bit. I mean, it's big, it's bustling, but it's a little bit. I don't know. I just don't find it's so compressive. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit spread out. It's relatively clean. The people are nice.
You don't feel like everything's just kind of squishing you in. I feel that.
Going like crazy. I mean, I'm down there every day, but in any case, I'm like you. Like I'd rather not be there. I'd rather be out somewhere up north or Lake Erie or wherever. But yeah. Well, much rather back when they open the borders.
Well, as soon as they open the borders, man, I'm hitting Simcoe. I have to.
There you go.
It's on the old bucket list for lakes I have to hit for sure. I gotta be able to say I caught one smallmouth out of Lake Simcoe. So that is the plan. But what's that?
I'm sure it can be arranged.
I hope so. We just need these dang borders and businesses and everybody to open back up again.
Yeah.
We're slowly getting there, but
it's
gotta be smart. Yeah. But before we get too deep in the podcast, man, you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how your story of how you got into fishing and who kind of installed the passion in you.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a roller coaster actually, because I started out fishing when I was a kid. We had a pond that my dad made, and I actually live on the same property now, and I fish out of. It's almost the same pond. It's gone through a little bit of a metamorphosis over the years, but I mean, back then it was stocked with trout, and my sister and I would go down and we'd dig up worms and put them on a hook and a bobber and cast it out there and wait for some big trout to bite, which was always fun. I mean, those things fight like crazy. The problem with trout up where we are in the summer, it gets hot and the pond is deep, but eventually it's not deep enough to hold trout, and there's just not enough cold moving water. So it got to a point where it's just full of chub. And when you're a kid, it didn't really matter, but the trout were nice to catch. And as I got older, I just got into sports, like I think a lot of us do, and between soccer and hockey and that kind of thing, and a little bit of football. Fishing just kind of you kind of just move away from it. You go to college, you're doing your thing. You graduate college, and then there was sort of a renaissance, I guess, when I went to work in Montreal, and I had a lot of free time on the weekends. I was up there. I was single and living alone, and started doing a little bit of fishing, and found out that there was a girl at our office that enjoyed fishing, and so I said, hey, why don't we go? And we started doing fishing dates, and lo and behold, she ultimately became my wife. And,
awesome.
She loved fishing, and she moved down here after I did as well, and we started bass fishing for fun, just for fun. And one day we saw that there was a tournament on a lake that we had gone to several times, and we caught some fish. And I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do a tournament on this lake? And so I called up the tournament director, and he said, oh yeah, you should do it on that lake. You should do all the tournaments. I mean, you should sign up for our series. And I had a small bass boat at the time, and I said, well, you know what? Why not? Like, we got nothing to do in the summertime. Let's try it. So we
I see keeping myself start going back.
Yeah. We got our asses handed to us in the first tournament on Lake Simcoe, of all places. I think we caught one fish at the end of the day. Looking back, we really didn't know what we were doing at the time, and almost just sat back and reevaluated and said, hey, do we really want to go through this punishment? Do we just want to go out and fish for fun? And we said, let's just try one more. So we tried one more, and of course, 5 minutes into the day, the trolling motor blows up, and it was almost like a sign from God. It's like, you know what, you're just, this is not for you.
Should have stayed
home. Well, anyways, we made the most of it, and I went to an area where I'd seen some in practice, and I just basically hunkered down. There was no power poles back then, but it was kind of a calm day, and I said, we're just going to fish here, and we ended up coming in ninth. And that kind of sparked a few little things. And then the next one coming up was that lake that we had practiced on, and not practiced, but we had kind of spent a year or two just going there for fun. And lo and behold, we won that tournament.
Dang.
And there was no looking back after that. I mean, it's like that was pretty much when I decided this is something I really love to do. And as you know, having played hockey competitively or any sport competitively, you get to a point where either you're going to become something professionally, or like the 99.9% of us, we just have to do other things. Yeah. And this just became an extension of the, that drive that we all have in us to compete, right? So I just pursued that, and we fished together for a long time until we had our first girl. And after that, she pretty much retired and became full-time mom. And I still do it. I fished with a lot of different people, and that's, I think, what made me even better. I mean, I was okay, and I'm not a great fisherman. I'm always learning, but I think you learn so much more just by fishing with different people. And I've fished with a lot of people since then, and every one of them, at whatever level, has taught me something. So that's, for me, that's the key, is just fishing with people and different people, seeing how they approach things. And, you might not be able to do it exactly the way they do, but you can put your own spin on certain things. Mm-hmm. And you find what works for you. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So that's kind of a short story long, I suppose, but that's kind of how I got started and brought me up to where I am today somewhat.
Well, it's awesome, because, I mean, there's two things I bring from that, or I take out of that. And one, I think it's awesome that you got to share such a long history with someone that you're spending the rest of your life with, especially with, an activity that you love so dearly. Yeah, obviously, fishing with your wife. I think that's incredible. But I think another point that you make too, that I like to talk about, is these different things, that we think mentally, mindset wise, that we apply to fishing. And you say how you fish with different people and you can apply what they do to you, and how you can't exactly copy what they do. And I think that's so important, like you said, to put your own spin on it, because if it's not yours and you're chasing after doing exactly what someone else is doing, you're not learning anything yourself. You're just saying, okay, what's that person doing? How can I copy it? I mean, that's not how you learn. That's not how you become a better fisherman. I mean, you can go and look at these different pros and you're watching, like, say, you're watching Bass Live or MLF or whatever have you, and you're watching how these guys, maybe how they break down water, or maybe how with their, a good buddy of mine, Destin DeMarion, who's been on the show a few times. I've called him after hard days on the water. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to ask you for tips. I'm not going to ask you for locations or where do you think I should go. I'm asking you, I would call him basically saying, when you're in a rut and you don't know what to do, like you're breaking down on the water, like you're getting frustrated, what do you do? Like, I always like to ask those questions, because, there's always, different things you can do, but, mentally, that is your biggest competitor, is your own brain. And so how do you get yourself out of the rut?
Every time you're on the water at a certain extent, whether it happens for 10 minutes, whether it happens for an hour, whether it happens for half a day, sometimes it happens all day long. You're just sitting there, and it's like, how do I adjust? How do I figure out what's going on here? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how Destin does it, but for me, what I've always found is go back to fish your strengths. And if you can do that, and break it down and just make it as simple as possible, and try and pick up from that. Don't overcomplicate things. Sometimes they're just they're not biting. It's that type of day, right? Like you'll come back to the ramp some days and everybody will have struggled, right? But the guys who catch them are the ones who stick to their guns and are mentally strong. And that's another aspect of bass fishing, which is, I think we're all trying to learn. It's just, how do you stay mentally tough when you get to those days? We can all flip, we can all pitch, we can all do all the mechanics we're all very good at. What separates, the Destin DeMarions from us or anyone else who's doing this for a living is like what's between the ears, right?
100%.
It's probably the toughest riddle to solve, and like I said, sometimes we can do it, and sometimes you just have to resign yourself to the fact that crappy day,
Yeah.
crappy day,
Yeah.
go back, sleep on it, regroup, and start again.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, but getting back to that point though, like real quick, because that's an interesting topic that we can talk about too, which is kind of mindset and whatnot. But I've heard a lot of people say like they try to copy their style based on somebody else, and like just real quick so we can change up. Like I just want to get this point out there is being the best you. Like the best advice I've gotten is be the best you that you can be. Because if you're trying to copy anybody, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's you got to establish yourself, the way you want to be, the way you like to fish. But that point aside, you bring out so the difference between like us and a pro is obviously mindset in your brain. And I think one thing that people do a lot, and I'm guilty of it every now and then, is basing your plan of going out to catch fish based on the past, based on history and what has worked in the past, and not what will work now under the current conditions. And I've gotten a lot better at this, but there's times before where I've gone out and I've completely smacked them in a certain area, and I'll go out when the conditions are completely different and throw a bait that makes absolutely no sense and wonder why it doesn't work. And it's because you're not fishing the conditions. The area is good, it has the fish, but you're not adjusting. You're too stuck on what worked before. And that's one of a good piece of advice that I've been working on is that. But like you said too, at the end of the day, if the fish don't want to bite, the fish don't want to bite. Like it's crazy. Yeah.
There are those times, and yet there's those times when we can evolve as anglers. And maybe last year you went there under certain conditions and you caught them this way. This year you picked up either a new technique or you just look at the water a little bit differently and you realize, hey, it's not a spinnerbait type of day. Maybe it's a chatterbait. It's a subtle little thing, right? Or it's something a little bit different. It's a swim bait. It's still a moving deal, but they want something a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That comes with time on the water, I think, and that's the other thing. So it's being mentally tough. And having seen all those conditions, which is experience, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting concept too. Is a lot of people, I keep saying a lot. I don't mean a lot, but there's a good amount of people that I've seen or I have done personally where I think I look at, these conditions and baits that you're going to throw and think, okay, this is textbook or this doesn't make sense. But a lot what doesn't make sense still gets bit for good reason, and I'll give an example to that. I just posted a video on my YouTube channel of throwing a spinnerbait, and I caught 25 pounds that day when it was sunny, hot, slack calm, and clear. Right. And when you think of a spinnerbait, it doesn't make sense. But what clued me in was when I launched early that morning, I saw bait flickering on top, and some bait was getting chased. Now some of them were up on bed, some of them were already moved up, but as the afternoon, they all started moving up, the bait was already up there. I threw a spinnerbait, and it made sense in that aspect. But if you didn't see that bait early that morning, you wouldn't really think to throw a spinnerbait.
That's right.
It's something that's pretty interesting there, and it's and another fact with fish not biting, it's if you know fish are there and they're being tough to bite, I mean, just keep moving, find different areas. Like I did that the other day, where one bay, fish were everywhere. They're all post spawn. They're moved out a little bit on isolated grass. I could visually see them. And man, I tell you to the point, they wouldn't even bite when I would bomb cast a wacky rig. They wouldn't even touch it. They were getting spooked by it. So I was like, okay, at the end of the day, it's up to them. I'm just going to move off and find active fish. The next bay up north, Absolutely. There you go. They were just on fire everywhere.
Yeah, and sometimes you can come back to those fish later,
Exactly.
Maybe the wind picks up a little bit. Maybe the cloud cover comes in. There's something that will trigger them to bite. But for that, hour, that window that you're there, they're being stubborn. You just, you can do the whole pull off and throw little baits at them with light line. But if it doesn't work, just move off, find active fish, come back to them. You know where they are. Usually when you see them like that, they're not going to go too far, right? And you can back and maybe pick one off. So that's one way to approach it for sure.
So are you a guy that when you're fishing, you're struggling, do you downsize, or are you a guy that likes to upsize?
Oh, typically 90% of the time I'll downsize.
Yeah.
I'll downsize and I'll slow down. Right. That's what the book tells you to do that. Right.
Yeah.
I have that mind to do that. The odd time I might just pick up something and move it a little bit faster, depending, and see, like you said, if you see some bait flickering or whatever, reading the water is so important, right? It'll give you clues into what you need to do. But if I'm really struggling and I have no clue, I will generally go with a lighter bait, a lighter setup, and try and finesse those fish, whether it's largemouth or smallmouth. I mean, there's times when small grub or any small bait on a drop shot will trigger a big largemouth to eat. Right?
Yeah.
You just got to think outside the box too sometimes. Like, don't be scared to throw little baits. I mean, I've seen it on my pond countless times where there's big bass and they're beside bluegill and they're just swimming side by side. And you can throw something big but if you throw something really small, it'll catch their attention. For some reason, they don't want a big meal, right? If there's bluegill swimming all around them and they're just sort of coasting, they could eat them anytime they want, but they don't want to.
Yeah.
They want just something small. They're not in a feeding mode, or that window is just really narrow. And so that's why typically I'll draw my experience from what I've seen and done and growing up on my pond. And typically, to me, it means going a little bit smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my rule. It's not necessarily, everyone's rule, but it's my go-to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like you said, that's your confidence, right? So that's what you're used to doing. That's what's worked for you. So why change it? And I'm the same way, where I like to slow down. That's the biggest thing for me. Is like to slow everything down. Like in the pre-spawn, my pride and joy this spring, and what's done so well for me, is a trap. And basically, it started. It was I started slow with it, and then started burning, which was so cool. And I've never really done it this way. Was taking the nose of a trap and pretty much just digging the living crap out of it. So basically just slow rolling it enough to where that nose was dredging rocks.
Right.
And that was just like, that bite stayed consistent for weeks. And that was something I've never really thought of doing, because you think of a trap and you think of grass. You think of burning it, right? You don't think of...
Yeah, exactly.
You don't think... right, you think of yo-yoing, and you don't think about using it like a big build crankbait. Like, you don't think about using it like a deep diver. And that was just something that was so cool to me. But that one idea that I've been trying to experiment with this year is, when the bite gets slow for me, to throw bigger baits or a more aggressive presentation. Because like you mentioned it too, if you throw faster moving baits, maybe it creates a reaction strike. Especially if there's wind involved. Like, that's something that could definitely benefit.
Yeah. My experience is, if I do throw something a little bit bigger, I might not catch as many fish, but typically I will get that one big one that I need. I mean, if I'm tournament and that's what's going on, I'll grab a chatterbait, and I know it's not going to catch me a lot of fish, but it's probably going to get me the one that will make the difference.
It's going to get you a nice one, yeah, for sure.
Baits, for sure. That's just being aggressive, moving it fast, and looking for that hungry fish.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your confidence baits when it comes to smallmouth and largemouth?
That's one of them for sure.
Yeah.
Chatterbait, absolutely.
I think it's becoming everybody's.
Yeah. I've been doing that for quite a while, and it's, like I said, it's not my 5-fish limit bait by any means. But when I need that one big one, or I need a key fish, and I've got time, then I won't put it down, especially if I've got time.
Yeah, I hear that.
And if you've got time and you can throw that thing all day, it's going to get one.
Yeah.
Jerk bait for sure. Smallmouth predominantly, although there are some lakes up here that the largemouth get on that bite too, just because of the forage that's in there and how they're relating to it. So chatterbait, jerkbait, and flipping, whether it be a jig, but most often it would be a craw type bait. That's
Okay.
always on, if not one, maybe two of them, different colors, different weights.
Yeah.
especially for largemouth, and sometimes smallmouth too. If you're fishing some rockweed combination, you'll pick up some good ones doing that too. But
Awesome.
those would be my three big ones, and then of course, top water poppers of walking the dog style baits.
Isn't it funny when you throw topwater how you even if they're like, it could be a place where there's no fish whatsoever, like they just don't exist in that body of water, but when you throw topwater, you're like, yeah, that's gonna get bit for sure. And like, you just seem so much more confident when it's a topwater because it's so visual and it's just badass without lack of better word. It's just fun to throw.
And experience tells you that usually a big fish will come up for it. I mean, one of the guys that's taught me so much when I was down in Florida, I've probably been out with him at least a dozen times, is Steve Daniel, who won the first FLW Cup that there ever was. And I mean, his philosophy, he uses a jerkbait a lot. He showed me how to use a jerkbait for largemouth as well. But his philosophy is the topwater is one of those baits that the fish just can't get a good look at. And it's easier to trick the big fish with the topwater than a lot of things, because they don't get a clear look at it, especially if you're moving fast. And so it's a confidence thing. And once you start throwing, and it's like any bait, the more you throw it, the more fish you're going to catch, the more big fish you're going to catch, the more confident you are. And it's just going to perpetuate itself. You're going to keep doing that. And it becomes your thing, right? So topwater is definitely a big fish bait for me too.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to do it.
Oh yeah.
And you just know it's going to happen. It's just a matter, right?
It's like every cast with a topwater, you're like, oh, that looks good, and you're like, yep, that's going to get bit for sure.
You just got
to
hook.
Yeah, right. Have you ever dabbled with night fishing for bass?
No, actually, I've never done that. I know a lot of guys down in Texas and in those warmer states, they do it quite often just because they can't fish in during the day. It's so hot.
Mm-hmm.
And with good success too. I mean, they get some giants at night, but I've never really done it. I like to go to bed early. I get up early, I go to bed early. So
I hear that. Yeah, I experimented a little bit with it over this past summer, and I found it's definitely a passion of mine now. Because, I mean, I've had nights, and it was just consistent nights when you read the moon right, and it'll work every night, but not to the extent of a full moon, where literally it was on the dot, 11:30. You hear small little bait start to pop. And then it sounds like it's raining, and the cannonballs are falling from the sky. This bait is getting hit so hard, and all you can hear is just your whopper plopper just do bloop, 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 and then it's just douche. And you don't see anything. You just, because it's pitch black, all you hear is that bait or that fish smack your whopper plopper, and your rod get taken out of your hand. Yeah. And man, I caught some of the biggest fish in any summer I've had at night for sure. And you didn't get a lot of bites, but when you did, they were big. They were heavy.
They've seen it all, so you can fool them at night. Again, they don't get a good look at it, right? So they can't really distinguish whether it's real or not real. They just know they got to eat.
Exactly.
And what better thing to throw at them than a whopper plop or any top water, really. But yeah, I should probably do it. I mean, I do have the means to do it. Just walk out and do it in my pond. I should be able to. Because those are smart. They are tough to catch at the best of times, but they keep me on my toes, man. I'm gonna have to try that.
Do it for sure. I feel like Simcoe would be kind of fun to do too. I've never really tried it on a smallmouth, heavy, like a heavily smallmouth lake. I've never tried that. I mean, I've done it at a lot of lakes where there's grass, because that's the fish school up, we push the bait into the grass, and that's when they feed. At least that's what I've found. I mean, I'm no expert at night fishing whatsoever, but from my experience, but
it works for you.
Yeah, but dude, man, if you ever want to come down, I got some secret stuff that is some juice down here at night, and it is. I'm telling you, like, I brought out a friend, and it's like, it's eye opening. Afterwards, like, when do we go next? Like, and it sucks when you have work the next day, but oh my gosh, is it worth it when you can get those bites? It's pretty awesome. Yeah, no, for sure. But it's just something different about it. But I'm so excited because like we're in spawn right now. And I love the pre-spawn, especially up north. The spawn is okay. I love to catch the chance at like sight fishing big fish, but I love flipping grass, and I just can't wait to night fish because once those fish move off bed and they're post spawn, oh, the night fishing is going to be so good. The top water is going to be on. I'm just excited for that. But I'm trying to focus a lot of my efforts this year out on Erie and Ontario, figure out some of the Great Lakes smallmouth because as much as people like you said how Erie smallmouth are easy to get to bite, I just want to figure out behavioral, where they'll sit up, where they'll migrate to, that sort of deal. I just feel like that's a big weakness of mine. So right now,
nuances. I mean, Lake Erie will be a little bit different than Lake Ontario, just structure. It's a little bit more sand, not quite as deep. So, yeah, it's a lot to learn, man. It's a ton to learn. And even though you're still fishing for that same type of fish, smallmouth, or it's they all have their little nuances, right? Just a little bit of subtleties that are a little bit different. But I mean, you can kind of relate the two, but you've got to do things a little bit differently, and you'll capture them.
Yeah. So do you fish Ontario majority of the time?
No, I don't really fish Lake Ontario that often, although it's probably, I wouldn't say, I'd say Lake Erie is closer. I mean, Lake Ontario is on Toronto for all intents and purposes, but there's really not a lot of good structure around Toronto, or at least shallow structure. So you'd have to go Bay of Quinte. That's where you kind of start to get, which is, I guess, not really Lake Ontario. It's an inner bay fed that feeds into Lake Ontario. But from there, it opens up into Kingston and Thousand Islands, right? So that's kind of like where it starts. But I've got some experience in the Bay of Quinte. It's more of a largemouth experience for sure. Yeah, I would like to maybe opener. I might go to Lake Ontario for opener. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one thing I was gonna, and we had a short laugh about it offline here before we started the podcast. But I was told you I was gonna ask you about largemouth in Canada because for some reason growing up I had all these TV shows of guys that go up north and they go fishing, and it's all these lakes out in the middle of nowhere, and they're catching smallmouth and pike and walleye. So I grew up with this perception for some reason, and I don't know why, that largemouth apparently don't exist across the border. But it's like, is it heavily smallmouth, or is there still a good population of largemouth?
That perception comes from a lot of these shows, American film shows, where they go into these lodges, and most of them are remote. And so the largemouth thrive well in the southern part of Canada, and I can only for Ontario because that's where I fish the most. But they also thrive in the southern part of Quebec too. After a certain latitude, they just don't grow well, and the smallmouth are much more prevalent. The walleye become much more prevalent, and it seems like a lot of these shows in the past, that's where they go to. They go to those lakes where smallmouth, walleye, pike, they're easy to catch, they're less pressured, right? And so they've kind of built this aura.
Image. Yeah.
That's all we have. But no, there's the Kawartha Lakes, which is an area to the east of Toronto, going towards Ottawa, and many of the lakes close to Ottawa that have just phenomenally huge largemouth. I mean, just you can catch a 7-pounder in some of these smaller lakes that are kind of not well pressured. You know what I mean? A lot of guys know about. There are lakes that have big fish in them. And but I mean, 4 or 5 pounders, they're out there for sure. You see them in tournaments come in, and tournaments won on largemouth. There's certain lakes that's what you need to win. Although the Trent Severn, which connects Lake Ontario to Lake Huron, they're all interconnected lakes. The gobies have gotten in there now, so a lot of those lakes that used to be largemouth factories where you needed largemouth to win, the tide is slowly starting to turn where you're seeing these big, fat, smallmouth come in, and that's because the gobies have gotten into the chain, and so now you're seeing different guys win a little bit. Guys who are more smally guys, they're starting to pick up checks and win tournaments, and The largemouth are just a little bit harder to. They might not be harder to catch, but the bigger ones can't seem to compete with those big fat smallmouth. So it's evolving. It's evolving. They're still there. There's lots of largemouth. There's lots of really, really good lakes for largemouth, but smallmouth generally seem to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever make your way up to the St. Lawrence and fish there at all?
I've fished the St. Lawrence, I think, a couple of times, really.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't have a ton of experience in that area. I fished a little bit around the mouth of the St. Lawrence in Lake Ontario. I fished a couple days in the river, but I would say I could count them on one hand how many times I've been up that way. I'd like to go. It's a great spot.
Yeah, it's one place I want to get up to because I feel ashamed as a New Yorker that I've never bass fished the river, and I feel almost like I'm not a New Yorker right now. I don't know, but one thing I like to bring up, I'm shaking my table here, is I brought it up on a few podcasts where we talk about largemouth and smallmouth and lakes and rivers and whatnot. How at a Bassmaster tournament, Hunter Shryock brought in 25 pounds of, I believe it was 22 or 25 pounds. Can't remember, of just largemouth. Yeah. And everyone was like blown away, saying, St. Lawrence River, how the heck did you do that with greenfish? But the place holds giant largemouth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who else did that? Who's the guy from California? That's older guy.
I know there's Brent Ayler. There's Justin Lucas.
No, the name escapes me. That he did that on the St. Lawrence.
Skeet Reese?
No, not Skeet Reese.
I'm trying to think of older California guys.
California guy, and he actually won a tournament not too long ago. It'll come to me, but I mean, it does happen. It happens. They're out there. It's just that, your percentages, your odds are so much better on smallmouth, and so they're more consistently bigger fish. That guys have put the odds in their favor, and they'll target them. But you can do well on smallmouth, and you don't on largemouth, and they don't really receive as much pressure, right? So
exactly, yeah, it's true.
Fish your strengths. I'd love to try them. I'd love to try it for sure, especially a good fish. That'd be awesome.
Well, I think you definitely, if for the pro tournaments, the guys that know that bite's there, I think you'd see more largemouth if it were for the gobies. If the gobies didn't get in the system.
Absolutely.
I think that's changed smallmouth fishing for sure.
For sure. Like back 25, 30 years ago, largemouth played a much bigger role in tournament. And then the whole ecosystem just changed. And 25-pound bags of smallmouth, it's just like guys are going out there and crushing them.
Yeah.
Tough to compete, right? It's tough to compete.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. So I know you've had your experience, you come down to New York now and then to fish some of the waters in the States, and do you find like a big difference? Maybe it's boat traffic or fish behavior or anything when it comes to fishing in Canada versus down here in New York?
I haven't fished the Finger Lakes enough. Like when you say New York, for me, most of my experience in New York is on Lake Erie, and to me, it fishes better. It seems like there's a little bit less pressure than a lot of our lakes out there here. So I would say Lake Erie fishes a little bit better than our lakes up here. For sheer numbers. The little experience that I've had on the smaller lakes, I don't know, it's different down there because I think your fish feed more on your largemouth in particular, because the inland lakes I fished a lot more largemouth than smallmouth. Those fish are more pelagic, I think, than our fish. So you can catch them on these moving baits, on swim jigs, on jerk baits. Whereas at home, we like to flip. I mean, they're a little bit more cover oriented. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, last year was an eye opener for me. I came to Cayuga and we're fishing for largemouth, I don't know, like 15, 20 yards off the bank. I'm like, this is foreign to me. I went down with my mic. I'm like, what are we doing with crankbaits and moving baits? And they're out there and they're feeding on on bait fish. They're not on craws. They're not tucked up in the grass or under docks or that kind of thing. We're actually, 20, 30 yards out, just fishing flats and lead-ins to flats. That, for me, that's different. At home, it's not like that. I mean, at home, it's more like Florida.
Oh, okay.
You're fishing reeds, you're fishing clumps of grass, you're fishing, not so much docks in Florida, but it's cover. It's cover oriented. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest difference that I find when I do come down there. It's much more open fishing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is, especially the Finger Lakes, though, is any sort, like they're big bowls of grass, and you know that. Any sort of structure that you'll find, whether it's a deep grass line or it's a rock pile or somehow there's a brush pile. Right. I'm sure there's guys that sneak brush piles in the lakes even though we're not supposed to do them. If there's structure there will be fish, but these grass lines, they cruise these grass lines, especially these deeper lakes, is these fish like to get in that colder water, especially the bigger fish. They like to, what I've noticed is, you start out deep, and then you move your way shallow in the afternoon, right. And then you move back out deep because those fish like to come up and sun themselves, obviously, when the sun comes up. But for some reason or other, they love staying in that deep grass because I think it's just colder for them. That grass is allowed to stay colder. It's not touched by the sun as much, so they can sit in that colder, deeper grass and be more comfortable.
Yeah. And they might be maybe a little bit more negative, and then when they go up shallow, at least again up here, when they go up shallow, they're there to feed, right? Those are our active fish, and I think that's why we target them up here. But yeah, you're right. Like on those Finger Lakes, they're a little bit deeper, they're a little bit more offshore, and I think they're just roaming for food a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe not eating as many crayfish as they are up here. I'm not sure, but they're big and they're fat. Like when you catch those largemouth down there, they are just they're big. It's unbelievable. They're just shaped different.
Yeah.
I think the diet just makes them a little different than ours.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In some of those lakes like that we have, there's not many people know, and someone might actually get pissed at me now they say this, but there's gobies in some of the Finger Lakes now. Not a lot of them, but they're starting to get in there because they're connected to Ontario. So we're going to see these fish start to do this, and it's going to be amazing. You're going to see a little bit more 7 and 8 pounders get caught largemouth wise, and it's insane.
You might find some even bigger smallmouth in those lakes, and they might even start to compete in certain areas. So I know that's the one lake in particular that I'm thinking up here that's happened to, that was predominantly a largemouth lake, is a lake called Rice Lake. And I mean, you couldn't win out there unless you're catching big largemouth. But now it's completely reversed. Those gobies have changed the entire ecosystem, and it's a smallmouth factory now. So
yeah,
a place I haven't been to in a long while, but I think I might have to go and have a look and see what all the fuss is about, because they're getting bigger. They're getting bigger.
Oh yeah, 100%. But isn't that amazing though, when you're fishing like maybe a pattern or an area, and you, like you said, fish are competing, where you're just going out back-to-back casts, green to brown to green to brown, and you're getting both species. Like the craziest moment for me this spring happened when I told you how I was fishing the trap. Basically, when I was fishing a trap, digging that nose in the rocks, I was fishing it very early season, so I was throwing it on 10-pound to try to increase my bites and get that half-ounce trap a little bit deeper, a little bit faster, so I wasn't waiting as long for it to fall. So it had a tendency to get frayed up a little bit. I was retying about 15, 20 casts or so. And basically what happened was I got lazy, of course, and I didn't retie one of the casts. And what do you know? I won't know for sure. So this isn't 100%, and people can tell me I'm wrong, but I was confident that I lost the biggest fish of my life that would have well been over 6.5. Largemouth came up to the surface. I just kept the tension on him, and I even had them thumbed. I opened the spool and I had them thumbed. Just one hard head shake, and snap. And I was just like crazy. But basically what the moral of the story was, as I tied right back on, threw the same lipless on, cast right back out, same exact cast, and then I caught my PB smallmouth, which was just crazy because it's just back to back, brown, green, and it just doesn't get better than that. And we're so lucky up here to be able to experience that.
Exactly, we've got a lot of lakes that are like that.
Yeah,
a lot. Absolutely,
it's insanity. I love it. Like I tell a bunch of people how much so many people would move to New York if it wasn't so expensive to live here.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize how good the fishing is there either. I think people think of New York, and a lot of people think of either the St. Lawrence or New York City. Like, I mean, for a lot of people, it begins and ends there, right? They don't realize everything that's in between.
And that's fine. That's fine. Let them go to the river. We'll keep these to ourselves.
I didn't realize either until I started exploring down there, and you start to realize, and you start to make friends and guys that say, "Hey, man, this is a good lake. You should come look at it." And lo and behold, they're awesome. There's a lot of awesome lakes down there. So, absolutely, yeah. Good thing to end so I can get back down there for a day or two.
Oh man, yeah. You need to get down here. I mean, it's spawn. It's full blown spawn right now. But some of the glacial lakes, this time of year is cool because you can go out there, and if you know what you're doing, you can go out and you can find spawners, you can find post spawn, and you can find some that are still pre spawn.
Yeah.
And that's something I've highlighted in these glacial lakes. They're so deep in the south end that the water temps are still, they have fish in the pre spawn. So it's awesome. You can choose what you want to do. It's just if you're willing to drive down the lake to do so.
Yeah.
So
it lasts for about a month where you can get them in all three phases. Absolutely,
yep.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, but I'm excited for the grass to come in. I miss flipping grass, so I need to get back to doing that for sure. So if you had to pick, like if you had to choose, I think that's the hardest question for us Northerners, whether you're in the Midwest or Northeast. If you had to choose, would you pick largemouth or smallmouth if you could only choose to fish for one?
Oh man, I think I'm a largemouth guy. I catch some good smallmouth. There's no doubt. I put myself out there to catch them a lot. But and I don't know if it's because I don't catch enough of them, and so you always want what you can't have.
Sure.
But just seeing this, it's more of a hunt, right? It's more like hunting. You're looking for those isolated little pieces of structure, and short line, heavy line. It's just you and the fish. I mean, I would choose largemouth all the time. I think almost every day. If I lived in Florida my whole life, I'd probably say, oh man, I want a smallmouth, or I miss the smallmouth.
Yeah.
Until that day comes, I'd say I'd love to target big largemouth if they're around. If the body of water has them, I'll try and find them. I don't always get them, and I'll fall back to smallmouth, but I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what I would choose. I've been catching a lot of big largemouth recently, and it's just been a blast. But I think 100% it's got to be smallmouth for me.
Yeah, well, that's what makes
something about it. I think they're just more difficult to figure out than largemouth.
Yeah, I don't know. On the Great Lakes, there's some. It can get pretty easy sometimes, and don't get me wrong. There's times when I go out there and I'm just like, man, I don't know do I even remember how to fish for smallmouth anymore? But typically, I just find that they're a little bit easier to catch.
Yeah. Oh no, I think you make a good point. I think if you get a bait in front of a smallmouth, they're a lot dumber than a largemouth. I think they're much easier to catch when you can put a bait in front of them.
Not dumber, they're maybe just more aggressive, right?
Well, let's go with that. Yeah, make ourselves sound better, right? But I think what I'm trying to say, harder to find, is in the Finger Lakes, like you said, they're very pelagic. They move around that thermocline so much. They're chasing bait so much where once the pre-spawn's over, where you can find them. If you find rock, you'll find smallmouth in the pre-spawn. After that, it's kind of tough to find them. It takes a little while, a lot longer to find than largemouth. I mean, after the spawn, largemouth, you find grass, you're going to find largemouth. That's pretty much just how it goes. But that smallmouth can be tough, especially in the Finger Lakes.
That's why your affiliation to smallmouth is because they're a little bit harder in your area to get right. Whereas for us, there's maybe more of them, and they're a little bit easier to catch, right? Mm-hmm. So those largemouth are a little bit more elusive, right? They're not in every lake, and if there are in certain lakes, they're only maybe in certain little bays. You know what I mean? So they just become, like I said, you always want the thing that you can't have the most, and for us, it's for me, anyways, it's largemouth, like
100%.
for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's the most elusive to you, and that's why you chase it so much, right? So it's
exactly.
And, it's gonna be. I have a. I'll talk. We can talk more offline about some certain plans that we don't need to echo out for the podcast that we have this summer. But yeah, dude, we gotta get fishing. I know. Once these borders open, we gotta get out in the water together for sure, 100%. But it was good to see you the other day when I was out with Andrew, my father. I was not expecting to see you. He's like, oh yeah. He goes, you know Morgan, right? And I'm like, yeah, why? And he goes, oh, we're gonna see him today.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's a pleasant surprise. And then so you guys went down through the river, I think, right?
Yeah, we went down to the river and went to look for some largemouth. Found a bunch of them. Found some big ones too. They just didn't want to eat. They're very spooky.
That's awesome.
So spooky.
They're
just tough to catch, but it's good. It's good to see them. It's good to try and catch them. And man, had we got the ones that we had seen, it would have been a banner day. But
damn,
we'll try again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that moon was up, so I don't know if that kind of made them a little bit more leery, if they were just coming up to spawn that night, or what the deal was, or if they had just done it. It was kind of weird, but some big ones out there, man. Some big ones.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard stories.
For Andrew's stories.
Andrew's got many stories, yeah. I'm sure he's listening to this right now, too. We can make fun of him a little bit. That's funny. All right, dude, we're gonna wrap this up in a second here. I got 2 questions that I like to end with, but before I do, where can people follow you on social media and keep up with your adventures?
Much just one place. I don't really do the Facebook thing, so it's on Instagram, Captain Morgan Legend. That's me, and tune in and come and like and share and all that good stuff, and ask questions. Happy to answer.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I believe that's where we met, just because of the general area. I'm just speaking on there.
A lot of good dudes doing that, man. Like Andrew, for sure. He's one of the first guys I ever met, and I still laugh at the story. He invited me down, and I'd never met him, and he'd never met me. And he's like, "Oh yeah, come down and we'll go fishing." And I'm like, "Okay." So, he tells his girlfriend at the time, "Well, I'm going with this." So she's like, "Well, how do you know he's not like a murderer or something like that?" But we went out. We had a great day. We managed to impale a jerkbait into his leg, and I took it out for him. So we've been friends ever since. He's a really good dude.
Any guy that'll take a jerkbait out of your leg, yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Morgan was on hand. But no, I met a lot of good dudes doing that.
Yeah.
And you learn, like I said, that's getting back to the very beginning of that's just how you learn, right? You just learn some different water. You apply your way of catching them. They learn from you. And it's a great thing, right? It's a great thing. As long if they're good people, it's a good way to fish, I think.
Yeah. Well, isn't that really unique and pretty special about our, whether you want to call it the industry or community of fishing, is that you can have somebody you've never met before but might have talked to you briefly on social media or the internet, and for the majority of the time they're going to be a genuine person. You can just go fish with them. You're going to have a good time. Yeah. And you walk away from it, either lifelong friends, connections, acquaintances, whomever. You might realize they're a nut job. You might not want to fish with them, but stay in touch with them. And then, but most of the time it's still, it's cool that you can just go out and just fish, have a good time.
Great.
It's exactly. I think it's super unique about the community that we have with fishing. So I thought I'd highlight that real fast, but yeah, Andrew's a nut job. We'll leave it at that. That dude's crazy. I've never experienced somebody who can answer a text message so fast. Andrew and I text probably. It's funny, and I don't know if she listens. I've never asked her. I've never asked my girlfriend if she listens to my podcast, but I text Andrew more than I do my girlfriend.
Oh wow!
he answers faster than she does. Oh, that's what was the last part? I didn't hear the last part.
I said you got a bromance going on with him.
Yeah, something like that. Either way, Andrew, you're nuts. But all right, dude. Well, I got 2 questions for you that I like to end each podcast with. The first question, it's either you're gonna get stumped, or you're gonna have your answer right away.
Okay.
It's a thought-provoking question. So, if you could invite any 3 people to dinner to pick their brain, who would they be and why? They could be past, present. Doesn't have to be fishing. Just who you want to pick their brain.
I think way back when you told me this was one of your questions, and I've listened to your podcast, so I know that it's a question that's coming. So I have given it some thought, and I got 3 people, and I'll tell you the reasons why. So the first one is Dominic Hasek.
Yes, I used to have a Hasek jersey.
I used to hate the guy. I honestly used to hate him. And, I think after he retired, I kind of started to, realize how good of a goalie he was, how mentally tough the guy was. I mean, he played behind some amazing guy like Ed Belfour. And he was a whack job, and he did nothing that was orthodox. And he would just win games for crappy teams and bring them places. And I'd invite him to dinner. I would just ask him, like, again, between the ears, like, what is going on in your head? What was going on in your head when you were in some of those games? Like, how did you have the mental toughness just to always bring it? Like, I mean, that guy always brought it. Like, he was. I mean, I don't think he was the best goalie I've ever seen, but he was pretty darn close,
For how unorthodox he was, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, he played into his 40s. Like, I mean, yeah. at a high level, that's just unheard of for a goalie, right? So, I mean, he's definitely one guy, and I love his accent, and he's got a funny sense of humor. So definitely, I think he'd be fun to have a few beers with. I've seen some of his Stanley Cup celebrations and his gold medal celebrations. So he'd be a nut job. So definitely he'd be one. A little bit more subdued. And I was going to change my answer after I watched him play golf, and that would be Tom Brady. He's maybe a little, I don't know. He's maybe not quite as cool as I thought he might have been. But the dude's a champ, right? Like, I mean, the dude's a champ. He is so mentally tough, and those 2 guys for me are similar. They were at the top of their sport for so long, in one of the most probably the toughest position to play, whether it's goalie or quarterback. Everything's on you. All the eyes are on you, and I mean, he would just be the type of guy that I'd just like to listen to some of his stories and what's going through his head when all those comebacks,
laser focused, yeah.
Confidence, right? To know, you could just see it in his eyes when he's starting these drives. You look at it, it's like, holy crap, he's going to do this again. He's actually going to do this again, and it's going to happen. He knows it's going to happen. Like, everybody knows it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible for me to try and understand how you do that. And we've all had moments in our lives when, in fishing, right? When you're out there and you're just so confident, you just know you're going to catch fish, and it happens, right? And if we could do that more often, we'd probably be at different level. I mean, we might not even be talking right now. You'd probably be doing something else, maybe competing against each other. Who knows? But for me, between the ears is the biggest thing, and those 2 guys are 2 of the biggest champs I've ever seen. So those 2, and the third one is purely historical thing, and that would be my great granddad. I've never met him. He came over from Italy back in the early 1900s, around the turn of the century, and he was an explorer. I mean, the dude came over with nothing. He worked, he mined, he panned for gold, he did everything, and then he went back home. And he, after 11 years in the United States and in Canada on the West Coast, he went back home and raised his family and lived out his life and had a great life. but just to hear some of his stories too about what things were like when he came over in the early 1900s and some of the stuff that he had seen, man, that would be really cool. That'd be really cool. Just a different perspective on things. So those are the three guys. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds of other ones, but for those reasons, those are the three dudes that I'd love to have a drink, share a meal, and just shoot shit, as they say.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like hearing I like when people bring up the family tree. I like hearing about those ones. Those intrigue me. I think the most popular answers I get for sure are the president, so Donald Trump, and then Teddy Roosevelt is a big one that people say.
Really?
It's a lot of the guys who also hunt and fish. So obviously, state parks and man-made lakes and everything are super important to them. But it was pretty cool. I like that. Tom Brady, Dominic Hasek. That's probably my most favorite answer ever on the podcast. Because I grew up I grew up a Sabres fan till I was like 5, and there's a picture of me when I was like 2 years old with a Hasek jersey on watching the Sabres games. Back when the Sabres were actually somewhat of a respectful team.
Right.
But I was always a big Hasek fan. I loved Hasek because I met him and I met Baran because I lived near Buffalo, so I'd play. Yeah. I had a Hasek jersey, and I wound up playing in Buffalo a bunch starting. I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I loved Hasek from that point on. But I became a Penguins fan like at the age of like 7 or 8 because I played against Mario Lemieux's kid, and Mario Lemieux was coaching him. So I got to meet Mario Lemieux. So I was like, all right, starstruck. Yep, I like the Penguins now.
Good reason.
Yeah, I love that Dominic Hasek. What's that?
Plus the Sabres kind of suck and the Penguins are good, so it was an easy switch probably.
Yeah, if I was still a Sabres fan, I would have missed 3 cups. I mean, come on now.
Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah, for sure. All right, dude, last question for you before we sign off here, and it's just simple, just your favorite fishing memory.
Oh, man. My favorite, I didn't even think you were going to ask me this. You know what? There's been a lot of good ones.
Maybe something that means most to you or something that's kind of impactful.
I think I'm going to take it on, and I was in a tournament, and it was to make the provincial team, what you guys would call the state team for the TBF. And I had won 2 of the qualifiers actually that year. And in any case, I was going on to qualifier number 3. And man, I was struggling so hard. I was flipping for largemouth. I couldn't catch a fish that morning. It was a grind. I finally get that one bite, and I got him up to the boat. I got him out of the weeds, and he popped off. And I just had kind of like a mini meltdown on the boat. It's just like, could I be throwing away a spot on the team if I just pack up and go home? And that confidence, right? You think back. It's okay. Like do what you do. Just do what you do. Focus. And I didn't change. I just kept flipping. And the biggest decision I made was to leave the big main lake, and I went back to where we launched, which was a smaller portion of the lake. It sort of funnels. And I hunkered down. And anyways, long story short, I had 4 fish, and it was like 2:45. Almost time to check in, and I was close to the ramp and to the launch, and there was one spot I had to go to. It was a bunch of slop mats, and I had been there in practice, and I knew that there was some fish around, and I didn't have much time left, and I saw this one slop mat. There was the shade from the tree was on top of it. It just was picture perfect, and I remember saying to myself, be there, just be there. And I threw it in there, and you make the perfect pitch. It was just like watching a movie. And then that line just smacked, and I got him in. And I think I came in 4th that day. It was. I mean, for me, that meant more than winning the other 2, to be quite honest with you. And the other 2 were amazing. They were great. But just grinding the whole day and sticking to what you know and having the confidence and making the right decisions and looking back and thinking, hey, you know what, I didn't win. I might have been one bite away, but I got the 5 fish that I needed. I came in fourth. It ended up making the team and being the captain of the team for coming in first overall through the year. But that one day, for me, after being to the point where you almost put your boat away and just say, screw it, I'm going home, to coming back and actually bringing in, you know, a pretty darn good bag for the day. And it ended up being one of those days, as we talked about earlier, where nobody was really catching them. I mean, here I am thinking, holy crap, you know, I've dug myself a huge hole. I think I only came in with 13 or 14 pounds, but like 15 pounds won. So for me, that was a huge memory. And honestly, there's many other memories, like taking my kids out and watching them catch their first fish from cast to catch. Like those are great. But from a purely competitive standpoint, that's for me, that's a pretty special one.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Adversity, overcoming adversity.
Yeah, you know what? That's what it's all about. Like these mental grind games that you have with yourself, like every minute on the water. I don't know about you, but me, man, like, I mean, there's that, it's always turning. That hamster's always turning, and you're always second and talking to yourself. And it's tough. People think tournament fishing is, it's not really a sport. But man, if you really sit back and think about how much stress you put yourself under, how much pressure you put, I put way more pressure on myself when I fish than when I'm playing goal or anything I used to do before. Like it's just it's crazy, right? Like it's so that's where we're at. That's a memory that's, you know, probably a pretty special one for me.
Yeah, I like it, dude. That's awesome. Well, man, I gotta say thank you for taking the time out. I know we spoke about it off the line. We've been doing this. We've been trying to plan this since before Christmas.
I know.
A long time coming. We finally make it work.
I hope I actually gave you something that you can replay for people.
Heck yeah, man, 100%. I hope it's not the last time you're on here. I hope we get you on a bunch, and I hope, like I said, I hope these borders open so we can get out in the water together. So.
Great time for sure, man. Absolutely. And if you need another guest and it's a slow week, ring me up. We'll
heck yeah. Heck yeah, man. You're always welcome on the show.
Sounds good, buddy.
All right. Take care, Morgan.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
See ya.
See you, buddy.
All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that podcast. We got really in depth with, you know, the mentality and, you know, the focus and the different variables that go into bass fishing. I thought that was pretty awesome because I always love speaking about that because not only does it involves, you know, great conversation, efficient conversation, but it helps you kind of, you know, develop your mindset and kind of tweak it a little bit for the better. So I think that was pretty awesome, and Morgan's a great guy to discuss that with. He's very knowledgeable, he has a lot of experience, and obviously has a huge passion for bass fishing, not only for smallmouth, but largemouth as well, and learned a lot in today's podcast, so that's pretty awesome. Morgan has been a great friend of mine. I cannot wait for these borders to open so I can go fish Lake Simcoe and go hang out with Morgan. So hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Go down in the description. Follow Morgan on all of his social medias. You definitely want to keep up with him for sure because the dude catches slobs. So make sure you guys do that. If you're not already, subscribe to the Ibra Outdoors YouTube channel. And you can always find Serious Angler on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Angler app, pretty much everything out there you can find the Serious Angler podcast. Thank you guys again for watching and listening, and we will see you guys next time.